Right now, despite everything you've accomplished, there's a voice in your head whispering, "You're not good enough." You got that promotion, but you think it was luck. You completed that project, but you believe anyone could have done it. Someone compliments your work, and you immediately deflect or dismiss it. This isn't humility, this is imposter syndrome, and research shows it affects up to 82% of people at some point in their lives. The phenomenon was first identified in 1978 among high-achieving women, but decades of research reveal it hits everyone, particularly those who are actually competent. The cruel irony is that the better you are, the more likely you are to feel like a fraud. And this psychological pattern isn't just uncomfortable, it's sabotaging your potential, blocking opportunities, and creating anxiety that follows you through every achievement. But understanding the mechanism changes everything. Welcome to Prime Theory, where we expose the psychology that's holding you back. Today I'm breaking down imposter syndrome, why it targets high achievers, the neurological reason you can't internalize your success, and the research-backed system to finally break free from constant self-doubt. This isn't about fake confidence or positive affirmations. This is about understanding why your brain is gaslighting you about your own competence. Let's decode it. Let's start with what imposter syndrome really means. Psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes coined the term in 1978 after studying 150 high-achieving women, PhD holders, respected professionals, and academically excellent students, and they noticed something disturbing. Despite objective evidence of success, these women couldn't internalize their achievements. They attributed everything to luck, timing, or fooling people. They lived in constant fear of being exposed as frauds. The researchers identified key characteristics: perfectionism, working excessively hard to compensate for perceived inadequacy, fear of failure, denial of competence, and fear of success itself, because success means higher expectations they believe they can't meet. Here's what makes imposter syndrome different from regular self-doubt. Normal self-doubt says, "I'm not sure if I can do this." Imposter syndrome says, "I've already done this successfully multiple times, and I still don't believe I'm capable." It's not about lacking experience, it's about refusing to accept the experience you have as legitimate. Someone with imposter syndrome can have years of proven success, awards, recognition, objective metrics of competence, and still believe deep down that they're faking it. Their brain rejects evidence that contradicts their internal narrative of inadequacy. Research shows imposter syndrome isn't evenly distributed. It hits certain groups harder. High achievers and perfectionists are especially vulnerable because they set unrealistic standards, then interpret anything less as confirmation of fraudulence. People in competitive or male-dominated fields experience it more frequently because they're constantly comparing themselves to others and feeling like they don't measure up. And here's something crucial. Studies find that people who are actually incompetent rarely experience imposter syndrome. This is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Incompetent people overestimate their abilities, while highly competent people underestimate theirs. So if you feel like a fraud, that's actually evidence you're not one. Real frauds don't worry about being frauds. Now let's break down how imposter syndrome operates as a self-perpetuating cycle. It starts with achievement-related task. You're given a project, a presentation, a promotion, anything that requires you to demonstrate competence. Immediately, anxiety and self-doubt flood in. Your brain says you're not qualified for this. You're going to be exposed. People will realize you don't know what you're doing. This triggers one of two responses. Either you over-prepare to a self-destructive degree, working way harder than necessary, because you believe you need to compensate for lack of ability, or you procrastinate because if you fail, you can blame lack of effort rather than lack of talent. Both are defense mechanisms. Then the task happens and you succeed. The project goes well, the presentation lands, you get positive feedback. But instead of internalizing this success, you attribute it to external factors. I got lucky, the standards were low, I worked way harder than everyone else, so it doesn't count as real competence, they're just being nice. Your success doesn't update your self-concept because you've already explained it away. The relief you feel is short-lived because now the cycle resets at a higher level. Next time there's an achievement-related task, your brain says last time was a fluke, this time you'll definitely be exposed. The anxiety intensifies because the stakes are higher and the whole pattern repeats. Research shows this cycle becomes more entrenched over time. Each success that you dismiss reinforces the belief that you're fooling people, which increases anxiety about future tasks, which drives more over-preparation or procrastination, which leads to more success you can't own. You're trapped in a loop where evidence of competence paradoxically makes you feel more fraudulent because you believe you're getting away with something. Psychologists call this the impostor cycle, and breaking it requires disrupting the pattern at specific points, particularly the interpretation phase, where you assign meaning to success. Here's the paradox that makes imposter syndrome so insidious. The more you achieve, the worse it gets. There are several psychological reasons for this. First, high achievers often come from backgrounds where love and approval were conditional on performance. If your parents, teachers, or environment only valued you when you succeeded, you learned that your worth is external and performance-based. So even as an adult with objective success, you can't feel secure because you're still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to withdraw approval and reveal that you're not good enough. Your self-worth never internalized, it stayed dependent on others' validation. Second, high achievers often have what psychologists call a fixed mindset about intelligence. They believe intelligence is innate, you either have it or you don't. So when they struggle with something or have to work hard, they interpret that as evidence they're not naturally intelligent, which triggers fraud feelings. Someone with a growth mindset sees struggle as normal part of learning, but someone with imposter syndrome sees struggle as proof they don't belong. This is why high achievers often feel like frauds in new roles. The learning curve feels like exposure rather than development. Third, the higher you climb, the more visible you become, and visibility amplifies imposter feelings. When you're early in your career, mistakes are private and low stakes. When you're senior, mistakes are public and consequential. The fear of being exposed as incompetent intensifies because the audience is larger and the cost of failure is higher. Research shows that people in leadership positions report higher rates of imposter syndrome than individual contributors, not because they're less competent, but because the scrutiny is greater. Every decision is examined, every mistake is visible, and the internal pressure to appear infallible becomes crushing. Fourth, high achievers are often surrounded by other high achievers, which creates constant upward comparison. You're no longer the smartest person in the room, you're in a room full of exceptionally capable people, and your brain interprets this as, I don't belong here, rather than I've reached the level where everyone is this good. This is especially common in elite environments, top universities, competitive industries, high-performing teams. Everyone around you is excellent, so you focus on the gaps in your knowledge rather than recognizing that everyone has gaps. You're just more aware of your own. Let's talk about what imposter syndrome actually costs you beyond just discomfort. First, it blocks career advancement. When you don't believe in your own competence, You don't advocate for yourself. You don't negotiate salary. You don't apply for promotions. You don't pitch ambitious ideas. Research shows that people with imposter syndrome are significantly less likely to pursue stretch opportunities even when they're qualified, because the fear of being exposed outweighs the desire for growth. You self-select out of opportunities before anyone else can reject you, which means you never reach your actual potential. Second, it creates chronic anxiety and burnout. When every success requires twice the effort, because you're compensating for perceived inadequacy, you're constantly operating in overdrive. You can't rest because rest means someone might notice you're not as capable as they think. You can't delegate because that requires trusting others to do what you believe only excessive personal effort can accomplish. Over time, this leads to exhaustion, burnout, and eventual breakdown. Studies link imposter syndrome to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and stress-related health issues. You're living in permanent fight or flight mode, treating every professional challenge like a survival threat. Third, imposter syndrome destroys your ability to enjoy success. You achieve something significant, and instead of satisfaction, you feel relief that you got away with it this time, followed immediately by dread about next time. You can't celebrate wins because you're already worried about maintaining the illusion. This robs you of one of the fundamental rewards of achievement, the feeling of accomplishment. Over years, this creates deep dissatisfaction, where no matter what you achieve, it never feels like enough, because you never credit yourself for any of it. Fourth, it damages relationships and limits collaboration. When you can't accept your own competence, you struggle to accept others' perception of your competence, which makes you defensive, self-deprecating, or constantly needing reassurance. People around you get exhausted by your inability to accept compliments or own your contributions. Or you become so obsessed with not being exposed that you avoid asking for help, admitting you don't know something, or showing any vulnerability, which prevents authentic connection and collaborative growth. High-performing teams require people who can acknowledge both strengths and weaknesses. Imposter syndrome makes that impossible. All right, let's talk about how to actually break this pattern. Step 1. Externalize your accomplishments. Create a document where you list every achievement, positive feedback, successful project, skill you've developed, problem you've solved. Be specific with dates, outcomes, and recognition received. When imposter feelings hit, you open this document and force your brain to confront objective evidence. The key is making this evidence external and tangible, rather than trying to remember it in moments of self-doubt. Research shows that people who maintain success logs experience significant reduction in imposter feelings within 90 days because they're building a counter-narrative with receipts. Step 2. Reframe how you interpret success and failure. When something goes well, practice attributing it accurately. Instead of, "I got lucky," ask what specific actions I took contributed to this outcome. Instead of "anyone could have done this," ask what unique skills, experience, or perspective I brought that made the difference. When something goes poorly, resist catastrophizing it as proof of fraudulence. Ask what I can learn from this and how this fits into normal learning curves. The goal is breaking the cognitive distortion where you take credit for failures but not successes. Balanced attribution means owning both. Step 3. Talk about it with people you trust. Imposter syndrome thrives in silence because you assume you're the only one feeling this way. But research shows that when high achievers share imposter feelings with peers, they discover almost everyone feels the same way. This normalization dramatically reduces the intensity of the experience. because you realize it's not evidence of your unique inadequacy. It's a common psychological pattern among competent people. Find mentors, peers, or therapists who can reflect back your actual competence when your brain is lying to you. External perspective breaks the internal distortion. Step 4. Separate self-worth from performance. This is the deepest work and often requires professional support, but it's essential. Start building identity and self-worth from things that aren't achievement-based. Your values, your relationships, your character, your growth, your impact on others' lives. When your worth is tied exclusively to performance, you'll never feel secure because performance fluctuates. But when worth is rooted in who you are, rather than what you produce, imposter feelings lose their existential threat. You can acknowledge areas where you're still learning without it meaning you're a fraud, because learning is human, not evidence of unworthiness. Step 5. Embrace strategic incompetence. This sounds counterintuitive, but it's powerful. Deliberately put yourself in situations where you're a beginner and openly acknowledge you don't know what you're doing. Take a class in something completely new, ask dumb questions in meetings, admit when you don't understand something. This trains your nervous system that not knowing everything doesn't equal being a fraud, it equals being human. High achievers often avoid anything they're not immediately good at, which reinforces the belief that competence should be effortless. Strategic incompetence proves that struggle is normal and doesn't invalidate your expertise in other areas. Here's what you need to understand about competence. Real competence doesn't feel like mastery, it feels like constant learning. The Dunning-Kruger research proves that the more you actually know, the more aware you become of how much you don't know. So feeling like you don't know enough isn't evidence of fraudulence, it's evidence of actual expertise. Incompetent people feel confident because they don't know enough to recognize their limitations. You feel uncertain because you're knowledgeable enough to see the complexity. That discomfort is the price of real competence. Second, everyone is making it up as they go to some degree. There's no point where you suddenly feel like you've arrived and you know everything. Every level brings new challenges that you're figuring out in real time. The CEO has imposter feelings about board meetings. The professor has imposter feelings about research. The artist has imposter feelings about their work. The feeling doesn't mean you're unqualified, it means you're pushing boundaries and growing. Comfort is a sign of stagnation, not competence. Third, your brain is designed to focus on threats and gaps, not achievements and strengths. This is survival wiring. Your ancestors who constantly scanned for danger survived, the ones who got complacent didn't. So your brain's default is to highlight what's missing, what you can't do, where you might fail. This doesn't reflect reality, it reflects evolutionary programming that's maladaptive in modern professional contexts. You have to consciously override this bias by deliberately focusing on evidence your brain is ignoring. It's not natural, it's necessary. Fourth, imposter syndrome isn't something you cure once and it's gone forever. It's something you manage as you continue growing. Each new level brings new imposter feelings because you're doing things you haven't done before, which by definition means you don't feel expert at them yet. The goal isn't eliminating the feeling, it's changing your relationship with it. Instead of I feel like a fraud, which means I am one, it becomes I feel like a fraud, which means I'm growing into something new. Same feeling, completely different interpretation. Here's the truth. If you feel like an imposter, you're probably not one. Research proves that imposter syndrome disproportionately affects competent people who are aware enough of complexity to doubt themselves. Real frauds don't experience imposter syndrome, they experience overconfidence. Your self-doubt is evidence of self-awareness, which is actually a prerequisite for growth. The problem isn't the doubt itself, it's how you interpret it. You've been treating it as signal that you're inadequate when it's actually signal that you're pushing beyond your comfort zone into genuine development. This is prime theory. We give you the psychology that explains why high achievers sabotage themselves, so you can stop letting your brain lie to you about your competence. Subscribe for weekly breakdowns of the patterns that keep capable people stuck. You've earned everything you've achieved. Your brain just hasn't caught up yet. Now you know how to help it. I'll see you in the next one.